add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is
Hiring on all cylinders.
Hello again, my wonderful, amazing, talented recruiters. Rob Stevenson here for Hiring on All Cylinders. I am thrilled you're back joining us. And before we get into today's episode, and it is a doozy, I wanted to plug a webinar that we are putting on in coordination with TripAdvisor. It's called 3 Steps to Nurture Your Talent Pipeline, as told by TripAdvisor. And you'll learn how TripAdvisor's messaging strategies increase open rates by 15%, how to structure multi-touch nurturing workflows to sustain candidate relationships, and a breakdown of their attract, engage, and convert model. What is that? I have no idea. You'll have to tune in the webinar to find out. It will star Jeff McCarthy, one of their technical sourcers, and Lori Bush, their talent acquisition program manager. It's going to be a banger of a webinar. You'll learn a ton of awesome information. It takes place Wednesday, February 22nd, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find the link in the episode description, and also if you go to our website on the resources page under webinars. So sign up for the webinar, won't you? Thanks so much. Anyway, down to business, down to podcast business. I am thrilled for today's episode because I am joined by the talent partner over at Lightspeed Ventures, Luke Beseda. Luke, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Hello, thank you.
You also were manager of recruiting at NextTag, which is later known as Wise Commerce. Do I have that right?
Yep, they did a rebrand a few years ago.
Okay, and then also you were manager of recruiting at Flurry Inc., and now you're at Lightspeed. Awesome to have you. We are joined also by Amina Valuad Moinadine, our senior business recruiter. Amina, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for asking. Always feels good when people ask. No one ever asks me on the podcast.
I'm sorry,
I
Rob.
care how you are too.
Oh, thank you. So we have normally I will catch up with you, Amina, and then let our guests sort of awkwardly wait while we while we do our thing. But I wanted to bring in Luke, and then we can catch up with you, and he can chime in as we do so if he wants to.
Absolutely.
So what are you working on?
Same as last week. I'm working on enterprise sales. So across the board for the sales organization, our main focus right now is just hiring our head of enterprise and then also hiring enterprise reps.
Okay. So are you more focused on one than the other?
Both are equally as important. Obviously, we need to continue to hire enterprise sales reps because we have revenue goals for this year, and the goal is to hire up front in the year so that they can start making an impact by the end of the year, because Q4 is typically our biggest quarter and we want to make sure that we have fully ramped enterprise sales reps. But on the other hand, hiring their manager, who is going to probably be the number 2 person on the sales team.
Right, yeah.
The second most important hire we've made on the sales organization outside of our VP of sales. So that is equally as important.
If I'm interviewing at Intello as an enterprise rep, you are, of course, going to fill me in on the fact that we're also hiring for ultimately your boss right now.
Yep.
Would that cause me to be a bit gun shy, knowing that I'm not going to be interviewing that person or interviewing with that person in the process? They're going to be coming later, and I'm going to start at Intello, and then sometime later they're going to hire my boss. What if I don't like that person?
That's a great question. That has not come up. I am very transparent in my conversations with them. I'm like, listen, right now the enterprise team reports directly into our VP of sales, but we are in the process of looking for a head of enterprise sales. So we are hoping to have somebody start within the next month to month and a half, and this person is who you would be reporting into. No one has pushed back. So
okay, no one's brought that up.
Not yet so far. I would say that's probably more common from people who are here internally, but it's absolutely something that they're thinking about.
Gotcha. Yeah, and maybe they might also think, oh, I could have a say in who that person is, right? Like if they were continually interviewing for that person and they start, then maybe they might actually get to help pick that person. So it could work either way, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question though.
Yeah.
Hasn't come up, but when it does,
you'll be ready.
I'll be prepared.
You'll be ready now.
Exactly.
Luke, any experience interviewing enterprise people?
Yeah, and I think to this problem as well. It's very common in a lot of fast-growing startups to not have totally aligned building of teams, whether it's bringing the junior people on first and then the senior leadership. There's usually transitions that happen on both sides.
Yeah.
So I think if one thing to focus on with whatever candidates come in is making sure they have exposure to the senior leadership that exists, so they get a sense on their decision making and priorities, and then giving them a real insight into what type of leaders that you have existing in your company, and they'll have a better sense for who you might look to bring on. And I think your point about them getting a say in the process, if that's what if that's actually an option for them to interview, is potentially a powerful lever as well. And very few people have the chance to pick their boss, and if you can, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good thing to focus on early on in the process with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, luckily they do get a chance to have a lot of time with our VP of sales. So I think that type of exposure, and he'll probably have conversations with them in terms of what are we looking for and what's really important to us when we're making this hire.
Do you look for these enterprise reps? Do you look for people that have experience in selling like human capital platforms and HR and talent space?
It's a plus. It's not necessary. I would say what's necessary is that they have experience selling into Fortune 1000 companies. They have experience selling enterprise SaaS. So that, and it's funny, I was talking to a candidate who's pretty seasoned, and he's like, the term SaaS has only been around for the last 10 to 12 years, but that's obviously the type of sales cycle and the type of process that we're looking for. So that's more important to us. Do they have experience selling HR recruiting? That would be great, but it's not necessary. We've hired people who are wonderful who don't have that experience.
Luke, you and your firm recently conducted this survey that I want to talk about. Should we talk about that now, or should we loop back to it after we just kind of hear about what it is you do every day?
Totally up to you. If you want me to set a little context on us as a team and how we interact with our startups, I might give you a little more insight into why we even did this thing.
Yeah, let's do that.
And what needed solving.
Let's get some context so we can kind of earn the insight later.
Sure. So I've been with Lightspeed for about 3 years now, and as you mentioned in your intro, I joined from a operational recruiting role. So first in-house recruiter at Flurry, which was a mobile analytics and advertising startup that ultimately got acquired by Yahoo. And when I joined, it was the common problem set that a lot of the companies we work with have. You found product market fit, you have your core team of people there, you need to grow really quickly, and it's complete chaos. So when I came on board, my mandate was to add sanity while keeping the engine moving. Right. So what we do within Lightspeed, and after we were acquired, I joined to start our non-executive talent team, and that was about 3 years ago. And our goal is to help our companies accelerate their growth. So it means different things to companies at different stages. Lightspeed does about 96% or so seed and Series A investment. We do a ton in enterprise infrastructure, and SaaS included. And the common use case there is founders, either first time or repeat, that either have a deck in an idea, or they might have a basic proof of concept or prototype, and they need to build every aspect of their business. So early on, it's about building these fundamental pieces. It's the kind of core people ops and talent systems and infrastructure. It's about building your core engineering and product teams. And then for some of our companies that come in that already have some traction, it's scaling their go-to-market functions. But a lot of this is about creating these fundamental pieces that let you be fast-moving and successful as you start to get more traction with customers. And we have everything up to Nutanix that went public last year, AppDynamics that was just acquired by Cisco, Snapchat that has recently filed an S1. So there's really this whole spread of 1 or 2 person startups to multi-thousand person late stage companies. And as we work with these later stage companies, it's a lot more about consulting with their recruiting and people ops teams to make sure they know the latest and greatest in tools and systems and process, how to leverage the Intellos of the world, and then how to navigate this very opaque world of talent acquisition. The way I think of it is, I try to describe it to founders is, imagine that you have a sales team, your enterprise sales team, for instance, that doesn't have a revenue target, that sales reps don't have quotas, that don't have any tools or systems to track progress. They don't have any marketing, they don't have any sales collateral, and they also don't have any sales training for their new team members. Like,
Sounds like a shit show.
Pretty much anybody would think
You don't
that's
have a sales team at that point. You have people who have the title of sales.
Exactly. And, that is insane in any core business function other than recruiting, where it is kind of the accepted status quo.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And from very early on, when we talked to our founders, we tried to at least give them that insight of, this is going to be chaotic. You're going to make a lot of pivots. It's going to be driven by factors that you only have partial control over. But what you can do is you can plan and understand the challenges you'll face, try to collect as much data as you can, and then make very data-driven decisions to at least approximate what a sales process would look like. So that's where this startup trends report that we did came from, is many conversations with recruiters, with founders, with business unit heads about their main pain points and their lack of ability to benchmark against peers. So we figured, we know a bunch of people. Why don't we just ask them what's happening? And we took a recruiter's perspective and did a survey at the end of last year of 150 startups on trends within recruiting, challenges they're having, and then use that data to kind of bubble up a story on here's where we think startups make mistakes, and here's where we think startups can improve their overall hiring process. So that's essentially what this thing is. It's driven by this core need that we have and that our companies have to better understand the world around us. Definitely.
Yeah, I hear that kind of frequently I've interviewed a handful of talent partners, and all of them report that about co-founders is like it's mind-boggling to them that you need to apply the same rigor to your talent team as you do any other like sales, marketing, product, whatever, what have you. So that's probably frustrating for you, like coming from talent, like to and you said like a lot of these founders are they have like anecdotal examples that they draw from. So is this report aimed at being like, hey, here's not just what I'm telling you I've seen, here's a report that's like, this is what everyone else is going through, and here's how you kind of line up as it is, and here's like what you can do to be more productive?
I think so. And one, absolutely. And two, it's like a lot of the weird things that happen within recruiting they're driven by rational decisions early on that kind of spiral out of control. So founders found a company. If they pass a Lightspeed bar to get funding, they probably have done something impressive in the past, have a group of impressive people that they know, they hire their friends, and then conceptually, a lot of folks have never built a company. And if they have built a team, it's been within a narrow function, like engineering or product. They've rarely had to do go-to-market functions, finance. So some of it, you kind of transfer your early on, like, well, I know people. We should just be able to go out and find people. I only need 6 this year. That can't be that hard.
Right.
I just hired 6 from my network. So some of it is shedding light on, like, well, here's the problem set that you're facing and the common challenges everybody faces. So this is not unique to you, but these are structural things that happen in, recruiting is, you're dealing with people. So you're dealing with the varying motivations of candidates. You're dealing with their perceived and real concerns around the viability of your company, the viability of your market, their interest in your product. So you're trying to stitch all this together into a cohesive story and be able to do this over and over and over again and improve incrementally while making it feel personal, because nobody wants to be candidate number 227 in the 300 you need to meet. This is a very personal decision. So how do you have scale but make it personal and kind of people-centric? That's part of what we are trying to do with the report, is pull out best practices so you can make fewer mistakes, save more time, and then focus all of your energy on these key functions within getting the right talent into your company versus wasting endless amounts of time either investing in the wrong area or having the wrong profiles or using the wrong resources. There's all kinds of mistakes you can make. And the report outlines high-level ones. That, by no means is it the exhaustive playbook, because there's so many nuances to a company. And the more venture talent partners you talk to, it's like any consultant, honestly. The answer you usually get is it depends, because there's so many counter questions you'd ask for a specific company, but there's still guideposts that you can use based on stage that can help.
I'm curious, what was the biggest myth that you realized founders believe about recruiting?
It's that recruiting should be easier, and that
of course.
It's funny thing is, like, the triangle that you can optimize. It's cost, quality, and speed, and you can optimize for 2 of those things at any time. No matter how much you want, you can't optimize for 3. Generally, founders are are successful because they are opinionated, they're passionate about something, and they, to an extent, shape reality around their beliefs. So telling them that you can't have all three of these things when they want all three of these things is a challenging thing to do. So, if you need to hire 20 people right now that are amazing, there's no way for you to do that cheaply. You either need to build a big recruiting team, you need to use a significant amount of platforms and like an Intello, or you need to hire outside agencies that can just bash away at this and then pay a large placement fee. So that's just one example of, until you've had to do it, you don't necessarily believe it. So
what if they say no? Like, I'm sure you've dealt with this.
Yeah.
What if a founder is like, no, I'm not going to hire a big recruiting team. No, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on agencies. And no, I'm not going to pay a lot for platforms. We can figure this out. How do you go and guide them and say, no, this is the decision you do have to make?
So we don't make it for them. You present them with the information that you have that can help them direct their decisions in the way that's best for their business, and ultimately they know their business the best. And you tell them the pitfalls, and you essentially say, here is what is going to happen, and that is here's the good part, here's the bad part, and pain is one of the best motivators for change. So the next time that those negative things happen and you have another conversation about, all right, here's how we can adjust, then you need to build credibility sometimes, just like with hiring managers, through them seeing something not be successful. Ideally, our report will also get us a little bit away from that, of it's showing pain across an entire industry versus the subjective pain you have to live as a founder who decides to try to just bootstrap this whole thing and not pay anything and try to get really good people for below market salaries. Like this stuff, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that keeps coming up too, this catcher in the rye notion of, like you mentioned hiring managers. We've had that happen before where, who was I talking to who was like, nothing gets a hiring manager bought into recruitment like their role's not getting filled, right? Like, I
mean, then they're like, oh, shit,
like, I need to sit down with my recruiters and figure this out, right?
Exactly. That's like, when or I've had it where we did it the hiring manager's way, and just we're going through candidates and it just, we're not getting the hires that we needed. So then it's like, all right, let's hear you, recruiter, and let's hear like what your strategy is and where we can tighten up the process. Right. But yeah, I mean, if you need that person, and especially in a metrics driven role, if you don't have that hire and you have revenue goals or you have marketing goals or you have some sort of goals and you're tied to that person and they're not there,
right,
you're screwed.
Not making that hire means not hitting those goals.
Yeah, or you're gonna work all night, all day, and still might not hit those goals.
Yep. Yeah, but it's so frustrating to know that it happens at the founder level too, where you would be like, all right, well, they'll come around when they realize that they don't have enough people and they need to take recruiting seriously, right? Like, I wish there was a way that people just got it right away.
Unfortunately, founders are people like everybody else, and they, they are subject to the same influences that we all are. So I think if you, from very early on, take a data-driven approach to how you build recruiting and understand the benchmarks of your peer groups, for instance, like in the pipeline metrics section of the report, for early stage companies, we found that 46% of these first conversations, whether it's a phone interview or on-site, were converting to on-site, or in person, were converting to on-sites. 30% of those were converting to offers, and then 78% of those were getting accepted. So does that mean that your company will have those same conversions? No, there's a lot of factors that go into that aren't captured in those numbers, but it's at least a good guidepost. So if you are doing something that negatively impacts candidate experience, and one of the interesting things we actually found was we didn't find any correlation between better interview outcomes as defined by higher conversion rates during the process and take-home assignments. So
I thought that was really interesting.
And I mean, this has been kind of something that I've thought for a while, but I didn't have any data to back up. Of anecdotally, as a recruiter, you are the first point of contact in the face of the company with every candidate, and you get insights into their concerns, what they're excited about. And no one's excited about getting a 5-hour homework assignment that they have to do on the weekend.
Right.
Generally, what it is a crutch for teams to say, all right, well, I was hired with this, so it makes sense somebody else has to do it. I know the answer to it. I can use this as my basic screen. It'll save me time from having to do a kind of interactive, maybe on the phone or through Google Docs or whatever, coding assignment.
It's an assessment that doesn't require you to assess them, right?
It's
like
a crutch. It's absolutely a
yeah.
crutch. And then the majority of companies also don't use it effectively on site, which means I just did a 5-hour assignment. Now I'm coming
There's
in.
no
Nobody's looked at this
follow-up.
thing.
Yeah,
They're asking me questions that could have been answered by it. So immediately the candidate experience is bad. Where our most successful companies adjust is they build a process that mirrors real life. So they will tell them an environment that they need to have to come on site. Again, this is for engineering. Have them do some pair programming assignments with the team.
That's what we
mirror
do.
something in real life.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
great. That's great. So you're
Paula's doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are ahead of the game in candidate experience. And then it's I'm not sitting in this sweaty tiny little room whiteboarding all day. I'm actually seeing what it's like to interact with people, maybe disagree with them, maybe find out that they know something I don't, or I know something they don't. It becomes a lot more of a human-centric experience.
And realizing that you in the interview process, you have the resources that will be available to you when you work at the company, right?
Absolutely.
Like when you if your boss gives you something to work on, it's not like, all right, now go away and only work on this yourself and get no help and then come back in 5 hours when it's done. So
Totally
you would ask other managers for help, you'd ask your peers for help, you would do whatever research you had available to you, which so as you say, mirrors a real life task.
And recruiting in general is a high volume activity. So as you could tell from those conversion rates, if you want to hire 100 people in a year, you need to talk to a ton of people. So it's easy to view candidates as metrics, and then you forget that this is a person who's taking half a day off work and might be concerned that this is the golden era of my career. Do I want to come spend 2 or 3 years here when I can do one of these other 3 or 4 startups? And particularly in the Bay Area, we're cursed with too many options.
Right.
So everybody you talk to is going to be courted by other companies as well. So you need to get this candidate experience stuff right. That said, one of the other things I was surprised by from our survey and the report was that the reasons for declining were agnostic to stage. And number 1 was comp, 2 was counteroffer, and 3 was scope of role.
So hold on. So when you say agnostic to stage, what do you mean?
I mean that from seed all the way up to...
Oh, stage of the company. Okay, gotcha.
Stage of company.
Right.
They reported the exact same reasons in the same order that their candidates were declining them.
Okay, and then counteroffer, meaning they go to tell their boss they're leaving, and their boss is like, what if we give you more money?
Absolutely. Or more money, a promotion,
Gotcha.
a project, whatever that lever is to keep that person there.
Okay, so compensation, counteroffer, and then scope of role. Gotcha.
And so I believe culture wasn't in the top 5, which is
really interesting.
So there's 2 ways to think about it. So one is that people don't always say, I'm not joining you because of your culture. Those folks might self-select out earlier in the process if you have a really toxic candidate experience and culture. I generally think that this means that we tend to tell each other or ourselves beautiful stories about, people join because there's razor scooters and, fountains of beer everywhere.
Yeah.
And we work from our rooftop on Tuesdays, when, culture is a lot more about how decisions are made, how people are valued, how you're incentivized through work, through promotions. That's usually not covered in the interviews. It's usually the surface level stuff for most companies.
So people are assessing culture wrong, you think?
I think they're describing their culture incorrectly. I think candidates have their own ideas of what they like as a culture. Think if you're somebody that's established in their career, that's interviewing with a young company where everybody's under the age of 25 and they talk about how much they party and have food catered every day.
Right.
To you, it might be more about who am I going to learn from? What are my growth opportunities here? So
right, and in that case, that candidate has seen instances of poor decision making, poor leadership, and they're like, all right, I'll buy my own lunch 4 days a week. I'm more interested in how the gears of this business churn.
I mean, I've definitely noticed that with more senior level candidates. The more experienced they are, the less they care about, whether you get free lunch or whether you can work from a rooftop. It's more of how do you make business decisions? What is your leadership like? What do those more important company type of questions are far more asked than I think somebody on the junior side.
And if people aren't asking, they're thinking it. So tell them, figure out your story, make sure that everybody on the team understands it and that it actually mirrors reality, and then reinforce that through the process. But ultimately, at least from the numbers that we got in our survey, which were fairly comprehensive, the people are willing to make some trade-offs, But if there is a huge gap in compensation, you're going to lose,
Right.
either from a counteroffer or they just won't accept it because they'll have another offer that's more competitive. So what I take away from this, and what we talk to our companies about, is everybody then needs to become an expert in explaining what your upside is. So in these like 4 areas that you control as a company, you control and you can talk about your team, the product you're building, and what that person will do, the market that you're in, and then your upside. So there's different stories within each of these, but if you're not good at that 4th piece, you're probably going to lose a lot. And that's outside of just we're going to be a $10 billion company in 2 years. Here's your shares. Here's your strike price. Like, I'll see you on Tuesday. You need to help people think through, well, what if I'm going to a late stage startup that's giving me RSUs? Is that guaranteed cash? What if it's a really early stage company that's giving me a full percent? Like, how do I evaluate risk? How do I look at public companies? So not just being an expert in your own compensation and what it means and how you think about growth, but also those competing companies that you're dealing with as well, because you might not be telling them, but they're thinking it and they're getting information from somewhere. So if you can't be a partner in that situation, then you're behind the ball. So that to me is a big lesson, and something we're going to build for our companies this year is more formal training around how can I be an expert in talking about compensation.
Yeah, I think, and one thing I think we do really well here is we give a lot of different scenarios. We're like, this is what your equity means today. This is what it means at this exit, that exit. One thing I've done previously before, and I'd love to implement this at some point, is what you said, is creating a scenario. Okay, talk to me about the other offers you have. Let's talk about how much that compensation means. Let's talk about ours and map this out and talk about what's really, really important to you. And I think I've done it before, where you screen share with them, where you show them different scenarios with different companies with different offers, and then talk through it with them. Because there's no point in having it be done behind the scenes. You should have that conversation. And if you reach to an agreement where this isn't working, maybe it's something I go and take it back to the hiring manager and we change something up, or it just wasn't the right fit at the right time.
Totally agreed. And if you're a really early stage recruiter, the first thing, I don't personally believe in bullying people into telling you what their exact comp expectation is, especially early on before they know who you are, what your company does. But I do think it's important to talk about trade-offs. So if you're coming from, ex-public company or late stage startup and you're talking to me, Series A first in-house recruiter, regardless of what the numbers are, there are very defined trade-offs you need to make in terms of, lacking perks like bonuses and 401ks. And there's really important upside you can have around, impact and growth, but also the potential upside of your options. So you should have that conversation very early on. And if you're getting a sense that, they're talking to you and 10 other companies that are all significantly further along in their development than you, then that's probably a red flag of they might not actually be ready to take that step into startup land, which has risks. A lot of people aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I try to tell my candidates too. Like, if you're talking to a Google or Facebook, this is not apples to apples. Like, you have to understand what that means, and are you ready for that? And is that a conversation you need to have with yourself, with your family? But you need to know going in, I want you to be eyes wide open to really understand that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic conversation to have, and fewer people do it than you would think.
Yeah. Well, podcast land.
Here we are. Yeah.
Podcast land.
Have that conversation.
Absolutely.
It never hurts.
So going back to sorry to derail this conversation. I waited for a natural pause there, but
I can ramble forever, so no worries.
The idea of companies explaining their culture wrong is fascinating, because you're right. It's so easy to focus on the happy hours, the perks, which are great. They're fun, right? Yeah. So is it up to recruiters, or probably like the hiring manager, to tell candidates, look, the Razor scooters are fun and all, right? The lunch is delicious, but here's the thing about how shit gets done around here. And then go into decision-making processes, go into here's an example of someone who had a cross-team problem and how they got it done. Here's like an example of someone internal being promoted. Here's an example of someone internal moving into a different team because they really liked it here, but they weren't a good fit in their role, and there was other role that we thought would work out for them, and it was more in line with their like career goals. So those are the things about culture that candidates actually care about. Is that what you're kind of saying?
I think so. I mean, naturally, everybody's different. And, one question that I recommend that all of our, really anybody in our portfolio talking to a candidate asks is very, very early on and very open-ended. Like, what is the one thing that you don't have today you want in your next company? and it's not leading,
I like that question.
you get a much more authentic answer than what do you want to do
What do you
next?
want? Yeah.
Because you can get meaningful things of, I don't have the growth path I want here, or I don't think that ultimately the industry I'm in is viable, or I'm not comped high enough, or there's a million answers that you can get, but those are indicators of what that person cares about. And that's what you build into your candidate experience and process. And
Yes.
there are kind of benchmarks everybody should talk about, this culture aspect, which, is, we invest a ton in this top of funnel meeting people. And then, some of the numbers that we found in our report were that 100% of companies should have this stuff. Performance reviews, only 64% of the total respondents had them. So that's crazy in that, how do you know if you're doing well? The only 82% of total respondents, and it was much lower for early stage, have onboarding. So when I start, how do I understand how to be successful here, what my job is, what do we do as a company? And then only 38% of those had internal mobility. So your best people, it's this kind of alliance tour of duty concept of they're gonna grow out of their role. They should. You should hire people that will be tired of their role within a couple of years.
Yes.
And you need to give them the opportunity to stay within your company, because you should not lose the best people. So if you don't have onboarding, you don't have performance reviews, and they can't move around, how do you build an actual company? You can endlessly recruit, but that to me goes into your culture. So if it's
you end up with like a revolving door. Your company is it's made up of people who are gone every 2 years.
Absolutely. It's a race to the middle. You'll have fine people. They'll stay for a period of time. They'll probably do decent work, and then they'll go do something amazing somewhere else. So if you talk about culture, culture is, I think, communicated through stories. So if you want to say we have internal mobility, that doesn't mean anything. Nobody cares. It's boring sounding. Like, I hate saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Tell a story, like you mentioned earlier, about somebody that joined, very common. People want to be in product teams, and they come from all different areas wanting to be that. So is there somebody that joined in a sales role, in a marketing role, and actually transitioned into product? And how did that happen? Why was that important? It showcases culture of, rather than just states it, because everybody says we're transparent in
Right.
what?
Everyone says like we're committed to helping you on your career path, right? But
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's easy to say, right?
Absolutely.
Show us the results.
In the spectrum of transparency, we have several early stage companies that have open board meetings. So if you're from the company, you can go to the board meeting.
That's really cool.
Whoa.
Amazing transparency.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
would
not
love
what
that.
most people mean. So again, if you don't define this stuff, and like that story, just saying that one thing, you've given 6 or 7 indicators about what the culture there is like, versus saying we are transparent, we empower employees, like whatever other like things you write on the wall.
Oh, another thing I was interested in that from the report was that a technical recruiter will hire 5 to 6 people per quarter, and how few companies factor that into their headcount, like goals and headcount capacity. So it just seems sort of backwards. Like, wouldn't it be obvious to be like, we want to hire this many people. Great. Let's go hire 30 people. You have 2 recruiters. On a good quarter, they'll hire X amount, 5, 8, 10. Where are those other ones going to come from? Where are those other 10 going to come from?
Great question. And what will make podcast land recruiting heads happy is the number one indicator of success that we found in the report was having, and success is defined by hitting or exceeding your hiring goals, was having the head of talent or recruiting or HR, whoever is at the top of the pyramid, as part of headcount planning discussions for that exact reason. Companies tend to do kind of irrational things. So I see 2 sides of it. On the venture side, one is these very beautiful ops plans that are presented to the board, are perfectly forecasted. They look great. They're tied to product roadmap. I go into the company and it's chaos, and it's actually not realistic to what they're doing or what they need to hire, and there's very little prioritization. So if you don't have your head of talent, that's one, helping you prioritize to say, given that we can do 5 to 6 hires a quarter per person, how many people do we have? And if we're not going to use any additional resources like agencies, candidate marketplaces, we have low referrals, then what are the priorities that will allow us to hire these critical people in this critical period of time? And without that, the answer is generally they don't come from anywhere. You're behind in your headcount. Yep. You jump around to non-critical path roles because they're slightly easier. Like maybe hire 6 test engineers, which is still a very important role, but is easier to hire than some senior data scientists or your next architect. So without planning and, again, data, and then somebody who can help you interpret that as an executive, because there's a lot of noise, to tell you what are the key signals and how to plan around it, the chances are you're going to start your year significantly behind in your hiring plan. So, to our pyramid comment earlier, you're going to pay for this one way or the other, and you're going to do it in cost, quality, or time. So you pick your pain and then build towards it.
Yeah, and it was interesting. It was something like 65% of companies don't include of the ones you surveyed don't include their head of talent and headcount planning, and even the ones that were further along that had, I think, 200 or 300 employees, even those companies, it was 85% were including their head of talent and headcount goals and headcount planning, which was absurd to me. And there's that Senator Warren quote going around that's like, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're probably on the menu. Hell yeah, head of talent. If you're not in that conversation, you're not gonna like the response, right? You need to kick that door down and say, I'm going to be a part of this conversation, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And if you're wondering, how do I get to the table, or how do I get as part of that conversation, the way you do that is through data and providing it in a way that executives want to absorb it. So as you interact with more executives over time, generally they want to see. They don't care about details until they want them. So they want to get a high-level picture of what's happening, what is working, what is not working, and then they want to be able to drill down into key metrics if anything is important to them. So you need to figure out what are the key things what are the key metrics they want and the key levers they need. Some people it's cost of hire, some it's time to fill. The metric I particularly like is the amount of production hours that goes towards one hire, and that can be for engineering or just so team time. So the amount of time each person that's a non-recruiter is interviewing a candidate multiplied by the amount of candidates it takes to hire them. So that is a very powerful number of what if you're spending 100 hours of engineering time to not make a hire because you decided to go $5,000 below what their asking was,
right? Yeah.
Or nobody on the team is calibrated and everybody's not good enough. That is a meaningful metric that you can use to go to your CTO, your CEO to say, we just spent 400 hours this quarter interviewing for roles that are not here. So how do you want to fix that? And you're essentially using this lever of data to then have a more strategic conversation versus saying we have 6 open roles, which is a go fill those roles type of conversation. So give yourself the ability to have a more senior conversation by having metrics bubbled up to the people in a way that they care about.
I love that. I've done that previously before where we did that exercise of hours and time spent, and it wasn't here, but it was where we saw that we had spent 700 hours to hire 13 salespeople for 700 salespeople hours, not the recruiting team at all. And that was when they were like, okay, we need to change something. Our process is not working. 700 salespeople hours that could have gone into selling and could have gone into bringing back more revenue. So I love that. I think that we could do a better job here, and people should absolutely be doing that because that makes such an impact.
No one is ever surprised in the positive direction when they do these exercises. So just keep that in mind. You're never going to be like, oh my God, we just hired everybody in 10 hours of interviewing.
That's never the point of the exercise, right? You're doing the exercise because you want to make a change, not because you're like, oh, we're celebrating. We did such a great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have to skedaddle at 6:40?
I can leave by 6:45.
Sorry, that was my bad for being so late.
No,
not
okay.
not at all.
It's okay. I have a 50 Shades.
She has an unmovable
darker date night with all my girlfriends.
Ooh, wait, is the new movie out?
Yeah. It's a post Valentine's Day fun girls' night
It's an
tonight.
unmovable appointment she has.
It is.
I totally agree.
I'm
Don't
so
move
sorry.
it for a recruiting conversation.
Yeah. Would you say you're bound to it?
Rob.
Is this gonna make it on the final cut? Is this too racy? This episode's gonna have the explicit tag. I
my God.
Light bondage references.
It's rated R.
Oh, all right.
So do we cover? I don't know. I know we got kind of.
You're great, by the way.
Sneaking
You're
around.
super, very good for this.
Okay.
No, we definitely stumbled across awesome material in this 45 minutes.
Is there anything else you guys want to cover? So I'll say, for podcast landy people, the
report.
The report is going to be published. This is a sneak peek just for the Intello team. It will be published next Wednesday, February 22nd.
Okay.
So expect to see a link at the somewhere on your podcast is listed with a link to the report.
I will add that link when the report goes live to this episode and then to the website. we're creeping up on optimal podcast length. So this has been
feel it.
This has been a ton of fun. Luke, come back anytime you want. I feel like we could keep going for another hour or so, but we'll cut it at 40 minutes. I think that's probably a good clip to be at.
Great. Yeah, no, it was really fun. So thank you so much for having me, and would love to come back.
Yeah, thank you. This is really fun.
Wonderful. Well, this has been an awesome episode. To all of you out there in podcast land, I've been Rob Stevenson. You've been wonderful, amazing, talented recruiters. Have a spectacular week, and happy hunting.